Hello. Today we're going to work through sort of an initial example of theoretical value as it relates to Disney. And so this is really about trying to understand how a decision that we had talked about earlier that Disney looks like they're making theoretically might impact the market value of equity for the company. If you'll recall, the decision was that they were going to purchase interest in a company called BAMTech, and they were going to spend about $1 billion or more on that in 2017, January of 2017. In return for that $1 billion, it looks like from their press release that what they're hoping is that BAMTech will enable their ESPN businesses to launch a subscription-based business over the internet. And so the idea would be that currently ESPN primarily sells content to people through cable companies, and now they would be able to let you sign up with them directly for some or all or whatever plan it is of content that they want at some sort of a rate, and get that over the internet and not have to worry about going with a cable company anymore. I am speculating that this is probably a bigger strategic play than just ESPN. Disney owns obviously the Walt Disney Company, so they've got all of their channels that are on Disney and all that sort of stuff. They've also clearly got the library of all of the Disney stuff. I don't know if you know this, but Disney now owns Marvel Studios. They own Star Wars as a property. So they've got all of these different sort of things that are part of Disney now. And then, of course, they own ABC TV, the network ABC. And so they've got all of that content, and who knows what else. I don't even know. Eventually they'll own the world, I guess. But anyway, so it's possible that they may be getting some planning to put themselves in a position where they could stream those things as well. And I know there's a larger or a growing, I guess, portion of viewers that are looking. I think the phrase they use is looking to cut the cable with cable networks and be able to just sign up for internet services and then stream whatever they want from wherever they want into their home. And so this looks like this would be consistent with that sort of a move. So anyway, at a high level, that's sort of the business opportunity and the decision it looks like they took. Now, in order for us to assess whether or not this was a business decision that was likely to increase the market value of owner equity in the firm, we're going to have to think about it a little bit theoretically. As we talked about before, we can only talk about whether theoretically it'll increase that value, and the market will do what the market will do. So to do that, we have to get at the cash flows for this. And quite frankly, while we know the $1 billion and we know the argument for what they hope to get in return for the $1 billion in terms of subscription service revenues, we don't actually know how many dollars they expect they're going to get. I came up with an estimate of $250 million in the first year, sort of first full year after this thing comes live, with a growth rate of 4%. I can tell you, in my mind, I came up with that very quickly as, let's just say there's 50 million households that watch TV. Let's just say that of that 50 million, maybe 25 million of them would be interested in cutting the cable on ESPN, or maybe not cutting the cable, but getting extra subscriptions from ESPN other than the stuff that's just normally shown. I assume, so there's 25 million. I assume that they might pay $5 or $10 a month for that subscription service. So that's somewhere between $60 and $120 a year. And I assume that the incremental profit that the ESPN businesses would get from that versus licensing their stuff through cable would come up to be something more in the order of maybe $10 a year. So not the full 60 or 120 in revenue, but just about $10. So $10 a year, 25 million viewers, that's 250 million a year. The 4%, quite frankly, part of that's inflation. I expect the prices will go up in the future because prices everything go up in the future. I think part of it is moving from the 225 million households to slowly picking up more households over time. And of course, with population growth, you could pick some up anyway. And then I also think some of it is that they will start to expand this from just ESPN into their other services. And as they do that, their other media, as they do that, they'll pick up extra subscriptions from those as well. So I think 4% is actually a pretty conservative number as well. When you put all of that together, what you wind up with is sort of this view of cash flows, if you will. And again, these are just theoretical. I made them up. But you got to start with something. And so initially they're going to have a negative $1 billion. Year one, they'll get 250. Year two, they'll get 4% more than 250, which winds up being 260 million. In year three, they'll get 4% more than 260. That winds up being 270 million. And of course, you'll see if you continue this on out that eventually they're going to be getting quite a bit more. They'll be up to like 325, 330 million a year at that growth rate. If you look at the cumulative cash flows, then what you'll see is that we start out being in the hole of $1 billion. We start paying that back, and by the end of the fourth year, we've paid it all back, and we're actually in the red. And by the end of the eighth year, we've not only paid back the $1 billion, but we've got over $1 billion in extra cash flows on top of it. So the thing turns itself around and starts paying itself back pretty quickly. I did sort of create this notional incremental book value. We start with whatever the current book value of equity is. We take off of that these cash flows for the $1 billion. I know technically you wouldn't take that out of owner's equity, but we're going to do it here just to kind of make the point. And then over time, you're going to add the cash flows back, and so you're going to wind up starting at 66, ending up at over 67 by year 8. Not too bad. All right. Now, all of that's interesting. That's book value, but what we want to talk about is market value. And so theoretically, we need to have this. We need to come up with something that incorporates the expectations about all of the future cash flows that you're going to get from this business into it. So there is a theory, and we won't go into a lot of detail about that right now, but there is a theory that allows us to say that the change in market value of equity should be approximated by whatever your annual cash flow is, so that 250 million divided by the cost of capital of the company, and we'll talk about that at a later date, minus the growth rate. So in that situation, we've got the 250 million, we've got the 4% growth rate. I assumed a 10% cost of capital. Again, I'm just guessing on this. I think it's a reasonable starting point. We'll talk a lot about cost of capital later on in the semester, but just bear with me for right now. And so if we plug those numbers in, then theoretically this says that adding that 250 million and then the growth rate at the 10% cost of capital should increase the value of the market value of the equity by $3.16 billion. Not too bad. You're going to spend $1 billion, you're going to get $3 billion in return for that. So that would suggest that the owners think that this is probably a good deal. If we were to look at that graphically, this isn't a perfect graph, but you started out at 170 billion in market value. If you're adding $3 billion, you're going to go to 173. if we think in terms of kind of what the cash flows would do to from the standpoint of the value for equity on a book basis, you would see that that they're adding, well, not really on a book basis, sorry, but you would see that we would lose some cash flows and then we'd start adding them back over time, and that eventually those are going to start, if we extend this line out, they're going to start to approach the line of the total value. And so on a cumulative basis, we're getting all of this money back. And that's what's really reflected in the market value is when we look out over the long term, this is how much we think all of these cash flows that pay back the $1 billion, this is how much extra we think they're worth above and beyond the $1 billion. So again, we're talking about a lot of theoretical stuff. I'm just throwing it out here for you right now. I haven't given you a lot of explanation on it. I really wanted to do this just as an example for you of the kinds of things we'll be doing later in the class. I find it's really useful to have a little bit of an idea where we're headed, if I'm going to learn something. And so this is my way of kind of putting that out in front of you. For your own purposes, don't worry about how am I going to come up with the cash flows, the 4%, the 10%. Just make whatever argument you want, okay? I'm fine with that. I want you to be thinking through what are the things that I need. Don't worry about the formula. Again, we'll cover that in a later period. Just use it on faith right now. Anyway, so that's kind of the example of what I'm hoping you guys will do. Thank you.